It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Margaret Swift Thompson. Having dedicated her career to the family disease of addiction for over 20 years at Hazleton Betty Ford, Margaret brings a wealth of knowledge and clinical experience to her recovery coaching practice, Embrace Family Recovery, LLC. Clients work alongside Margaret to develop healthier coping mechanisms for their baffling family disease. She believes in possibility over pathology. Margaret is a dynamic speaker and a lifelong student. She is a CTA certified coach and a She Recovers coach, and she brings her long-term active recovery from codependency and food addiction to the table. Her creative approach to family work matches her enthusiasm and ability. So we're so glad to have you here, Margaret. I'm going to spotlight you and you can take it away.
Thank you, Kelly. What a great introduction. It is so good to be here. And I don't know if you saw me pumping, but I am thrilled to be designated as a She Recover coach. It is a new part of my journey and I couldn't be more honored. So, hello, everyone. And it is great to be here with you. As was said, my name is Margaret Swift Thompson. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm coming to you from the mountains of North Carolina, where I've recently moved. And I'm a recovering woman in long-term recovery with food addiction, codependency, and I have survived and continuously heal from childhood trauma. I want to share today about the family disease. My belief is this disease affects everyone in the family. And why I launched Embrace Family Recovery is because every family member deserves recovery too. The spirituality journey for me has been a tough one in my personal recovery. And I see that a lot in the clients I've served over the years. I've come to believe and appreciate that our higher power shows up in skin. Mine certainly does. I never know who, I never know where, but I know that I get nuggets given to me in places. And I was on the internet, on the web today, and this came up on my feed. And I thought, there's a wink. No coincidence. I got to throw it in my slides. So this is written by a child or teenager in Alateen. My mother is not an alcoholic, but she is a sick person. My father is an active alcoholic, and his disease spread through the whole family. I think my mother was most affected by his drinking, and she, in turn, affected me. She constantly worried, was nervous, and I resented this because my friends' mothers were never like that. I resented her. I just did. I know I held resentments to my prior partner who had a disease. I know I held resentments towards myself for my own addiction. I held resentments to other people who didn't do things the way I thought they should. Resentment's a big part of this illness, as is shame, guilt, distrust. And the reality is there is hope. The message that this young person wrote here was so beautifully said because they separated the person from the disease. They also talked about what they were feeling. And I think even though it's hard to read these truths, that everyone we are touching in our lives is affected by our disease, I think there's a lot of hope in it because they're learning about the possibilities of recovery as well. So this was what I read, which was a reading done by a young person in Alateen. And I want to move into this slide, which is where I was when Kelly thankfully saved me. Powerlessness and unmanageability are a part of our disease, whether we have it or we're a family member. And as I shared briefly, I came into recovery through the Al-Anon door, or through a 12-step door for family members. I identify as having codependency, and that was my saving grace. I have gratefully grown in my recovery in so many ways to embrace there are so many solutions to this illness. What I feel is imperative is the need for education for us as loved ones and for us as people with a disease to help our loved ones understand the impact on everyone. So when my fiance and I were together, I had no idea that he had a behavioral addiction. He called it a compulsion, so I'll use his language. And I received an anonymous letter in the mail that informed me that my fiance had this and that it involved a download lifestyle of high risk. And I remember in that moment, and I've heard this from many family members over the years, I had this moment of like, well, that makes sense. And that makes sense. And now that makes sense. And then suddenly these pieces of the puzzle all fit perfectly together and the picture made sense. And that was a moment. And then immediately after, I was filled with self-loathing and anger. And how did I not know? And how did I not see? Why am I so stupid? And it was horrifying. It was this immediate self-loathing and hatred for being ignorant or made a fool of or not understanding. And what I didn't know that became very clear as I engaged in recovery after this relationship, which is a story unto itself, I couldn't find my way in until he had ended the relationship. And I have to say, I was probably so sick at that point, I wouldn't have ended it because I was so dependent on him. He had become my drug of no choice. So why I say that is I did everything around him that he did around his behavioral addiction. So for example, he was preoccupied and obsessed on a regular basis with when he was going to do it, where he was going to do it, how he's going to get away with it, how he's going to keep it from me. I was preoccupied and obsessed with him. Where is he? What's he doing? Will he be home? Is he going to? Is he not going to? Can I trust him? Can I not trust him? And so that was a mental preoccupation I experienced around him all the time. Talk about denial. As a recovering food addict that didn't get into recovery until almost a decade after entering codependency work, and that was a painful decade. I was in a level of denial despite working in the field of addiction, despite seeing this disease around me. I couldn't face my own illness, even when I read the big book and the word alcohol came off the page and I read food. So denial on the family side was when I first met him, my gut check went, something's off. Got to know him better, asked some very direct questions. And even after that, I accepted his lies. Didn't know they were lies, but accepted it even though my gut was saying something's wrong. And I think a lot of that on the family side comes from loving the person, wanting to believe what they're saying, even if the behaviors don't match. And also a sense of, for me, my lack of self-worth, my thinking I was damaged goods. And so I deserved so little that I took little. There's a saying that was given to me in early recovery of stop settling for crumbs. And that's what I felt like. And I think even in my food addiction, ironically, food and crumbs go together, but I feel like I settled for crumbs for a very, very long time because I didn't know what I didn't know. Loss of control and over control. So as the disease progressed, families and loved ones see a lot of behavior that is scarier or more aggressive or more out of character. And as a family member, what tends to be the reaction is over control. The loved ones try to control more, try to keep the person safe, are scared to death all the time, living in a reactive state. And so they're trying to get the person to under control and keep them safe and fix and manage them. And, you know, I've heard many family members say, I feel like I have, when it's a partner, 3 kids. I'm doing everything. I'm so tired. And blaming the addict for that. And some of it comes from terror because of what if everything goes wrong and the wheels come off. And some of it comes from having to accept that we are conditioned by this disease as family members to play certain roles, just like the person who has the disease is conditioned by the disease to behave in certain ways. Isolation. As an addict, the world gets smaller. When we're in our disease, it gets smaller because we're so dependent on what we're doing to survive in our pathological relationship with a behavior or a substance that supersedes every other human need we have. And so in the isolation on the family side, my experience was I was trying to keep the secret. I didn't want people to know. I didn't want them to judge. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I was fearful of people intervening and saying and doing ugly things. What I didn't understand then that I've come to learn through my own growth and recovery is I was, in fact, helping the disease get stronger, not helping my loved one in any healthy way by isolating. But again, I couldn't see that at the time. This disease affects us all on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. This disease puppeteers us in so many different ways. And why? Why do we feed into this process? What makes it happen so easily for us as family members? Well, society does condition us to be caretakers. And so when we look at people who have other illnesses, it's not uncommon to jump in and do everything, clean the house, take care of the kids, feed everybody, fundraisers, whatever, to help the person who's identified as having an illness. So with the disease of addiction, the challenge is that when I, as a family member, do everything to make it easier for the person with the disease, which feels right to me as a caretaker, then I am actually helping the disease get stronger, because what has happened for me and many of the clients I've worked with who identify as having an addiction, we don't get well until we're in enough pain to do what's necessary to get well, until we're feeling the hurt the disease is causing us. And family members will often say, well, how do they not know that I am hurt by them, their disease? How do they not see that? And the best analogy I can come up with is when I came up for air, when I was more conscious and I could see the hurt and pain in my husband or my children's eyes, the disease within me told me, you know how to get out of this. Just go and eat, escape, get out. And that voice is more tricky because it's with my own voice, not someone else's voice. So family members are confused by that. How do I separate the person from the disease, which is part of the coaching I do? That's a goal. We work diligently to separate ourselves from the disease, to allow us to not live in shame and the cycle of it taking us back down. And we focus on separating the loved one who has this disease from the disease. We hear a lot of, if I could get you well as a family member, if I could get you well and spend all my time and energy getting you well, I'm going to be great. I'm going to be fine. And the reason we think that is we put all blame on that person for the way our life has gone. And I had that too. And until I entered into understanding the disease as a family disease and realizing I brought into the relationship some characteristics that fueled this relationship successfully in a destructive way, did I understand that I had a part in this. I walked around saying I'm fine all the time. If anyone knows, fine stands for effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And I was all of those things. Nobody would know because I had this facade going 24/7. Because be damned if I was going to let anyone see I was vulnerable, if anyone hear what was going on in my head. I also hear a lot from family members that they believe the disease is their fault. Children who are not educated in this family disease of addiction but are growing up in it believe somehow they caused it. That's not from anything they've been told necessarily. That's just from what's going on in the home and their mind processing it. So I hope and pray families choose to educate their children who are living in this disease, because they are intuitive beings and pick up things before we even articulate them to them. Parents, we hear a lot. I hear this a lot. I did something, it's my fault. And when we parent from that place as family members, we parent to the disease and it hurting the person we love, rather than setting healthy boundaries and doing caring without fixing and some of the tried and true paths that are the most successful for healing ourselves and supporting our loved one who has this disease in the healthiest way possible. Family members in their obsession and preoccupation think, if I pre-think everything that I could see in my loved one, I'll be prepared. I'll know what to do. That's not humanly possible. And the way you can help with that is recognizing your own story as family members. How many different things have happened you couldn't predict? Because this disease is very unpredictable. It takes no time at all to step us into a more dangerous, scary world than we were in 2 days ago because of the nature of the illness. So many years ago, when I was out of the relationship with my ex-fiance, and I would call myself at a rock bottom place. I was in Hazelden Betty Ford as a student. I was learning about addiction. I still didn't know what to do to care for myself. I was too busy getting more education to look good rather than to actually heal and recover. And I got the chance to observe a role play where I watched a person with the disease on one side of the room and their disease as this persona Slick on the other side of the room. And they were using tools of recovery to stop Slick from controlling them and taking them back to use. And I remember sitting in that room that day and having this epiphany watching this role play saying, I have that. I had that with my ex every time I turned around. What's that called? And there was no name for it. So I created Monkey Chatter. And Monkey Chatter is the voice inside my head, my own voice, but the voice inside my head that tells me, fix, manage, control. Don't let go of control. Don't stop fixing. That's your job. If you love him enough, you'll make him well. And I share this a lot in the talks I give because I want people to have words for what they're experiencing, because words are powerful. And so I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of what my insane monkey chatter looked like. And I'm just going to encourage you to breathe through it in case you do find yourself triggered, because it brings up your awareness of your own experience. So when Ken would leave for work in the morning, I would leave I would make it as pleasant in the morning, as loving in the morning, as trustworthy in the morning, do everything I could to make it a good start for the day, thinking somehow that would make his day be okay and he wouldn't need to. I didn't know what I didn't know. And he would walk out the door, and as soon as his foot would cross the threshold, I would hear the monkey start. Where's he going? Wait a minute, what time is it? He's got 2 more hours for work. He doesn't need to be at work yet. Why is he leaving this early? You know why he's leaving. No, he's not. He said he's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. Okay, what should I do? I know, I can go follow him. I can follow him and see where he goes and keep an eye on him. No, you can't. If he sees you follow him, he knows you don't trust him, he knows you're lying, then all bets are off. It's not going to go well. Okay, what if I go to the bank? If I go to the bank, I'm near where he likes to go. And I can stand behind that one-way glass and I can see if he's there. And if he's not there and he's there, I go hang out for a while. I got a little time. If I see him, oh my God, if I see him, you know I'm going to cause a scene. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to scream at him, go nuts. I can't do that. I can't make a public scene like that. Okay, I better not do that. I know, maybe I should go to lunch. If I go to lunch with him, I can see how he's looking. I can see how he's acting. I can see if he spends time with me. But he has that weird look in his eye this morning. He said everything was good, but he had that weird distant look. That's not a good thing. Why am I even in this? Why am I staying in this relationship? I'm not even married to man. I should be out of here. Why would I? He's going to lie to you. He's going to fool you. I can't do this anymore. I can't stand this. Okay, what am I going to do? I know, I'll go to work. Hi, how are you? It's so good to see you. How can I help you today? And the reality is that facade would come down. I would show up for people, and I was always using the defense of, let me get into them and how they're doing so they never find out about me. And then I'd walk away resentful because none of them ever cared about me. They didn't not care about me. My MO was don't let anybody in, because if they really knew me, they would run for the freaking hills. And monkey chatter is a term I believe is so empowering for family members to understand that we have triggers too. We have triggers as family members, and so we need to talk about triggers, and we need to teach family members about triggers and realize how these triggers are ours to heal, that no one can heal them for us. And so getting into our own recovery and healing and coaching and therapy to help us understand what this is about is so important. So triggers for family members are sights, sounds, behaviors, and mannerisms that immediately trip the where are they? What are they doing? Oh my God, that fear and panic and that rapid talk of the monkey. Okay, so the triggers kick off the monkey. And we don't even know for sure what the triggers are. So many family members have told me, I didn't realize I was so triggered by the garage door opening until he got home from treatment. I'd love if you put in the chat a few of your triggers that you're aware of in your family. As addicts, I know I have a lot of triggers. I get angry, that's my biggest trigger. Being around certain things, certain food types, that's a big trigger. Family of origin celebrations are triggers for me, right? If I'm lonely, I'm more triggered. If I take a vacation, oh my God, early recovery vacations were a nightmare because that was such a high-risk place for me until I learned how to do it. So families have triggers. And while you're hopefully writing in the chat, and Kelly, if anyone writes a trigger, please let me know. I'd love to hear them. Triggers I've heard over the years: ice going in a glass, creaks on the steps, the fan in the bathroom running for too long, a bedroom, the laundry room, the man cave or the garage, someone saying I'm running an errand, the text tone. All of these happen, and instantaneously that feeling of fear and terror kick in, and the monkey chatter starts, and it doesn't stop. And unknowingly, as family members, we look to our person who's the addict to get well, to stop them. But think about it. If our loved one got sober and wasn't using, do you think they might use ice in a glass? Do you think the step might creak? Do you think they might go in the garage? Do you think they might go out for a drive and run an errand? Children will tell me the hardest one is when they come home on the bus. Because when they've come home on the bus, they got home and this scary stuff was going on. So just getting on the bus can be a trigger until there's help for that youngster to understand what is in their control, what is their safety plan, and how to care for themselves. Any triggers, Kelly?
Yes, so we had a few here: baby crying, parent being aggressive,
Mhm.
and moving or relocating.
Thank you. All fabulous ones. Because the reality of what I'm trying to share with these triggers is, as with addiction, if I don't have the tools and skills and resources of my community, a sponsor, a mentor, a coach, my reading, my literature, my yoga, my meditation, if I'm not doing the recovery tools that keep me healthy, the triggers kick up slick, as I call it, and I'm off. Family members, it's the same. If I do not engage in an education and have a support community and a place to go with what my triggers are, when that baby cries, I'm triggered. You know, when I have to move or geographically change something, or if I have to do anything that is in my brain planted with the old patterning, it kicks it up until trust is rebuilt. The way trust is rebuilt, words and actions matching over time. Family members ask that all the time. When will I trust them again? How will I trust them again? I should trust them now. They just got 30 days, right? Trust is earned through words and actions matching, because one thing this disease does is destroy our ability to have our words and actions match consistently. I can lie like the best of them. I can even con for a while, but to do the two together consistently, I can't be what I am if I'm in recovery. So I said earlier, the who's driving the bus was one of the gifts that I was given by someone in recovery. And you know, messengers come in all places. This was given to me by someone who I did not have a respect for. But my higher power allowed me to hear it, and I use it a lot. So the goal of recovery for us as family members and people with this disease is to trust our higher power is driving the bus, and we're able to be at the back seat, trusting that our higher power has the wheel. Now, when I came in, I was up behind that wheel, grabbing that wheel anytime I thought I knew best. And I'm grabbing the wheel of my partner. As a mom now, I want to grab the wheel of my kids' buses. That's why I still attend meetings and work my recovery program in Al-Anon and in other 12-step places and in She Recovers, because I need the reminders of how sick I get if I don't take care of me first. So how do I get to the back of the bus? By sitting in a She Recovers meeting, by reading my literature, by taking a walk, by talking to my sponsor, by studying literature, by working my program one day at a time. What happens when you have your hands on the wheels of your bus and everybody's bus going down the highway? You crash. Family members do not understand until they learn that they are not responsible to make the other person well. And in trying to make the other person well, the trigger sensitivity of everybody in that cycle is rich. And we're tending to ping pong off of each other. The moment that stands out the most for me was when I was in early recovery with food addiction, which meant no sugar, no wheat, which is what I do still in my recovery, thanks to my recovery, my higher power. And I was going to a birthday party, which was a pool party. My kids were about 1.5 and 4.5. And I remember I was really anxious about this because it was one of the first events. And I called my sponsor. I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. And she's like, okay, well, let's talk about strategies. So the strategy we came up with was be of service to the mom of the birthday child. Do anything to help. Be of service. I'm like, I could do that. Keep your phone with you and call me and get out of there if you need a break from it all. I can do that. So off I went. We went with the family and we did the event. And I was actually quite amazed that I didn't have a preoccupation with the cake. And I was helping the mom and everybody was sitting down eating, and I was taking trash to the trash, and I turned and put the top on the cake because everyone had been served. And I felt this turn around, Margaret, turn around. And I turned around and my baby Amelia was in the middle of the pool going under. She got in there somehow. And I remember screaming and jumping and grabbed her. She was okay, thankfully. And I'm holding her when they're that little person and they fit under your chin. And we're scared. And I got this calm come over me from my head to my toes. And it was basically that I felt or heard, and I don't overanalyze that, I accept it, was Amelia has a higher power and it's not you, but I need you as healthy as you can be to assist me with her when needed. Because if I had been in the food, my preoccupation would have been consumed with how I get enough of that damn cake out of that room to eat in my silent place with nobody around. So my job and family members' jobs is not about trying to fix, manage, control others. It's about taking care of ourselves to be the healthiest ones we can be. And I want to end with some positive hope. Recovery impacts our loved ones. We don't know how, we don't know ways it does until we're living in it. But I remember thinking, my disease has done so much damage to my family. How will we ever heal? And I was early in recovery, and I had gone to a meeting, and I came home, and my husband, Rob, at the time, was in the kitchen cleaning. I'm like, let me help out. You know, I'm in a great place. Let me help out. So I go to the staircase, and I roll up a bag of cookies inside of a box, and I'm shutting it. And I hear from behind me, "You're not eating those, are you?" Oh, no, he did, right? I'm like screaming mad instantly. I'm like, what? Who the hell do you think you are telling me what I can and cannot eat? Are you kidding me? I can eat this whole damn box if I want. You can't tell me what to do. What is wrong with you? My addict brain just zoom right there. And I marched right around there, and I'm holding the box, and I'm like screaming at him. And he looked at me, and his face was in shock. And he said, "Margaret, I just don't want to lose you to the food again." Because the reality is, guys, I wasn't a partner. I was on the couch eating till I slept. I love to eat alone. When the kids were napping, the husband was asleep, anything I could do to eat alone in mass quantities, I wasn't functioning. Because when I was awake, I was thinking about it. When I was eating, I was thinking about it. When I was with my family, I was thinking about it. And that's different now because of recovery. My youngest, Amelia, when she was 9 years old, looked at me and said, "Mom, am I going to be an addict like you?" It took my breath away. And I said, "Baby, what made you ask?" She goes, "I don't know. I was thinking about it." I said, "Well, we've talked about how we have this disease in the family, and there is a possibility. But hopefully you don't have the gene." And you know what she said? "I hope not too, Mom. I guess the good thing is if I do, I know how to get help because you did." Parents, if that's all we give our children, that's huge. And the last one is Abby, my eldest. When my mom passed away last year, which was really hard, year and a half now, I was in Bermuda, which is my home, and my family was in Wisconsin. And I was getting calls from Abby pretty regularly, and it was really hard. And I was having a tough day, and she said to me, "Mom, would it help if we said the Serenity Prayer together?" Abby? She's an agnostic or atheist. This is not her thing. And she said to me, "Yeah, would it be okay?" I said, "It'd be amazing." And she looked it up on her computer, and we said it together. My family has heard me say the Serenity Prayer upwards of 3 times a day, every day, since they were 1.5 and 4, 1 and 4. I believe my recovery out loud helps them. And if we're the family members, this is what it feels like.
Yeah. Okay, got that. Stop, move that leg. Yeah, okay. Clap, move this leg. Okay. Show me what you think so far, what you got so far.
Same person.
Okay, I don't know the lyrics, huh? Get into it, yeah. Get into it, yeah. Get into it, yeah. Get into it. Okay, yeah, sure. All right, just like follow my lead. Ready?
You know, such
And then freestyle, and then do whatever you want. Okay.
I show that because I get awkward watching it, but I have such respect for these young people, this couple. But I think of recovery as me in treatment or me in recovery, working a program. My family's left in the dust if they're not in their own recovery. And this young woman with the pink shirt on is sharing her new steps, right? But the family member wants to learn them, but they don't have them yet. And it's awkward and it's uncomfortable. And I think that our living in the disease, with the disease puppeteering us as a member of the family, not just the people, but the disease, we have to learn a new dance, or we choose to, or we deserve to. And so it's going to be awkward until we learn how to do that dance. And I encourage you and your loved ones, well, mainly you to yourself, give yourself grace and patience, but also do the same for your loved one. And know that I have worked in the field of addiction for decades, and I am passionately led to create Embrace Family Recovery because I know what we offer families for resources is substandard. If they're lucky, they get a day in a family program. If they're lucky, they get to a meeting or find a community or a church group or a peer who has the same illness. Loved ones deserve education and support more than ever. And I think that if we could acknowledge that family members need it so that they can feel like they understand what they're living with and can find healthier ways, it's a win-win for all the family members, including the person identified with addiction. Thank you. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm happy to be helping.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So let's get right into our questions that we have so far. And please, if anybody has thought of some questions while Margaret's been giving her presentation, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A feature on the webinar or in the comment section on Facebook, and we'll get them answered. So our first question is, do you have any new family traditions in your recovering life?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I love questions because I'd rather answer what you all need than just talk at you. So please feel free to drop them in there. You know, recovery tradition started when I first started getting into recovery with more prevalently the food addiction. I truly believe that my codependency allowed me to have the partner I have today. That's the first thing. But the traditions that we started having is, I remember once my children and my husband made me a fruit birthday cake with just fresh fruit, because that was something that I could have in my abstinence. So I think the traditions have been me living my recovery out loud and letting them know that I'm living my recovery out loud. I have another funny little story where my little one went to some sort of event and the mom was sucking on a sucker, like a lollipop, and she freaked out. Mom, she's sucking on a lollipop. Oh my God, she's gonna get angry. And I was like, okay, we need to re-challenge the conversation here, because not everybody has the same addiction mom has, and some people can have suckers and sugar and other people can't. And so part of it is always being open to communicating and be really honest with ourselves of when we are too triggered to do that. You know, because sometimes when it comes to our family systems, we can't hear it from one another because we're so much wreckage between us from this disease. And so one of the magnificent things that I was trained in at the Hazelden Betty Ford Family Program, how it used to be run, was we would only have family members in the room with non-related people in treatment. And the reason we did that is because that allowed for some empathy, some experience of learning from one another and hearing one another, of people that seemed like our person but weren't our person. And so that's why I think it's critical for families to have their own tools and resources while we find our tools and resources. So I don't know if that was much about traditions, but.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next question is, I think a lot about this topic is letting go of control. Do you work on exercises with your clients to help them learn how to let go?
Yes, letting go of control is a significant one. And I think it's one of the ones that rears its ugly head the most on the family side, because control is this really nice is a bad word, but is this really nice way of feeling like we're okay if we feel we're in control. And it's really unpleasant to be around. You know, if you've ever been with anyone who's in control and trying to manage and control even a game or an activity, it's like, oh, you know, you feel really confined and reactive and triggered. And so one of the things that we have to look at is the false narrative behind control. And what tools will help that person? Because I have tools that work for me, but that may not be what works for you, Kelly, or for anybody else listening. So it's like, let's work together. One of the things I love about coaching is the person in the room is the expert about themselves. I have a lot of expertise about this. Let's get together and figure out the strategy that works for you, that fills your void, that gives you some traction in your recovery. And so, yes, I would say one of them obviously is breathing and finding meditation of any kind that slows us down, because we're so conditioned by this disease to be reactive and in crisis mode and always going. So it's even just learning to live in a sense of, how do I get still when I'm too scared that my feelings will take over and I won't know what to do?
Yes, that's great advice. Awesome. So the next question is, how can we slow down the monkey chatter in the moment when it's happening?
Great question. I think key first thing is actually acknowledging that's what's happening A second thing would be, if you're in a relationship with the person that you're being triggered by, to say, I'm being triggered right now. I need a timeout. Like, own it. Don't make it about them to fix, but say, you know what? I'm having this trigger. My big one is narc on the flipping monkey. Find a safe person who you can tell what you're hearing to. Because usually if we can do that, we can not only slow it down, we can hear the insanity in it of what it's trying to get us to do and whether it can be helpful. Acknowledging the monkey's going crazy right now and it's starting to say all these things and I'm feeling anxious. The other thing is doing the grounding. You know, I can't show you my desk here, but I'll whip out a few of, I have crystals and rocks. And when I sit with people in person, I encourage them to hold things to help bring them back to the here and now. Plant your feet on the ground. You know, is this a trigger that's based in today, here and now, or is this a trigger from 6 years ago that I haven't healed and worked through yet? And the big one, though, is diffusing the power of the voice in your head by saying it out loud to someone safe. And if you can't find someone safe, possibly use a journal where you write it, or there's apps like Youper. There's different apps online where you can actually type out or dictate things. There can be a place to just dump it so that you get a moment to just, the big thing is not react, not let it trigger you into the reaction, and be gentle with yourself, because we're not good at this. You know, we really work hard in recovering as people with addiction to be gentle and kind to ourselves if we were to relapse or pick up. Family members need to do the same, because family member relapse and return to behaviors from the past happens faster many times than it does with people with addiction. And so being kind to ourselves and recognizing this is a well-lined path of reaction for years we've been doing. And Kelly, let's talk about generational disease. I may not have ever dealt with my childhood if I grew up in a home with addiction. And then I end up in a partnership with an addict. And all of my historical trauma, pain, patterning shows up in this relationship from my past, because I've never learned how to heal from that and navigate that with skills that could help me in that relationship. So I do think we have work to do around looking at those patterns and slowing them down.
Yes, and while you were mentioning that, it reminded me of one of our intentions and guiding principles at She Recovers is we answer the calls to heal our past wounds and intergenerational traumas so that we can live fully in the present moment. So that's definitely something we're all working on in this community for sure.
It is. And the other piece on that is to give ourselves grace. You know, I've heard many partners who've ended up in new relationships with new people with addiction, even though they left their past one because they felt they needed to for their well-being. But because they didn't continue to work on themselves, they ended up finding themselves in a new partnership with another person with this disease. There's no way they put on harmony.com, only addicts need apply. Right? I mean, that's not what happens. There's this intangible connection we have of knowing how to behave in certain relationships because we've been taught it by the disease of addiction. I know when I met my now husband, I looked at him and went, how's this going to work? He's not a fixer-upper. Because I didn't know what to do with people that had some health and wellness about them because I wasn't in that place.
Exactly. Okay, so our next question is, how can we separate our care about the individual who's experiencing addiction and trying to control the outcomes for them?
Can you repeat that?
Yes. How can we separate our care about the individual who is experiencing addiction and trying to control the outcomes for them?
You guys give great questions. I would say that the big one there is to remember the term caring without fixing. So a wise mentor of mine taught me a long time ago that the principles of recovery as a family member is how do I get comfortable with the discomfort of not being able to make something better for someone else and show up lovingly to the person that I do love, set boundaries around the disease so I protect myself from it. And care without fixing offers that because it's saying, I love you enough to give you the dignity and respect that you get to figure out your life and the way it's going to go and how you're going to care for yourself, while I will love you and cheer you on, but I will not take responsibility, to use Sandy Swenson's term, to unable you from becoming all you're meant to be in life. You know, when I unable someone in my family, I'm robbing them of learning what they need to learn for their well-being and becoming that person they're supposed to be in life. And that's not what we want to do as family members. So it's a matter of tolerating discomfort. And I don't think family members tolerate discomfort any more than people who identify as having an addiction. As an addict, I went to the food for comfort. As a family member, I went to trying to find someone else to fix, manage, and control to get out of my discomfort.
Yes, great advice and very hard to put into practice, I think, for people. But yes,
very hard.
Definitely a practice. Okay, so our next question is, what's one tip you can give to family members today who may be struggling with a loved one who is currently using alcohol or drugs?
Breathe. Be willing to look for resources for you. So, as I've said, I've worked in this field for a long time. I have seen family members get second mortgages to afford treatment for their loved one, but not afford themselves care for them. So the analogy that works the best, the analogy that to me makes the most sense, is when you're on an airplane. Put your own oxygen mask on first, then help the person next to you. In this disease model, that is completely backwards. We are putting the masks on everyone else and not on ourselves. And so I would say, if you love someone right now who's using, are you willing to acknowledge you've tried just about everything to help them stop or make them stop? Are you willing to look at what you have and have not done for your well-being and care because you've been greatly affected by this disease and you deserve support and help? Are you willing to go to a She Recovers gathering where people are in the rooms recovering from varieties of things, including codependence? Are you willing to check out other meetings and resources out there for yourself? Are you willing to consider not keeping secrets for the disease, which might be terrifying? But if we keep secrets for the disease and we clean up the wreckage of the disease, the person with this disease doesn't have any consequences. And as a result, don't realize that they need help and deserve help too. Safety first, always. If you're living with someone who is unsafe for you, what is your opportunity to get safe for you? And especially if there are children. I say this now, and I probably should have earlier. When there are children in the family, they need us to provide safety for them from the disease, because the disease robs the people who have it of making decisions always that are in the best interests of their children. I certainly took risks with my children that I should have never taken, that I can't take back, but I can work every day not to repeat going forward.
That's great advice. That's so important. Definitely safety. And I think that was wrapped into like another question too, of how people can support their loved one, even if they can't, fix them and they're loving them from afar. But obviously safety is top priority for sure.
Loving from afar brings up a different one, Kelly. I don't know if this was what they were asking, but I've done it too. I've dropped everything to race to my adult kid, right? When it comes to safety, we have to look at, is that the best thing to do for me? Am I doing that to make me feel better, or I'm doing that because they truly are in a life or death situation? That's a big question to ask ourselves, and that's muddy at first. But the other thing is, if I can't physically get to somebody, can I do a welfare check with the local police so that they can make sure they're safe? Because safety is an issue. Obviously, we know overdose and death are part of this illness. And we have to consider those things. But I think that loving someone from afar offers a different challenge because you're right next door, which is kind of a break from the day-to-day seeing it. But then you're on pins and needles waiting for the call and the shoe to drop and how to handle it and what to do. And it's just a really difficult disease to try to navigate. And it certainly is impossible to navigate alone. And most of us try and do it alone until we learn we can get help.
Well, one thing we say at She Recovers a lot is you don't have to recover alone. And that's really important to us. And we welcome anybody who may have loved ones that are drinking and using currently, or maybe navigating this type of situation in their own homes. So we're glad to have you today as our speaker. I don't see any other questions. So unless anybody else has any further questions that we haven't seen yet, is there anything else you would like to add, Margaret?
How about some resources?
Sure.
Why not give some resources to people? So for our children who are, when I look at the levels of help out there, there's help for people who identify as having a disease. Yes, accessibility can be difficult. I agree. And then there is other great help out there, and insurance has changed the ability to access help, which is good. The help for families comes next, overall, partners, parents, but then the help for children is even lower. There are less resources for them, and children are living in this day in and day out in homes. And so one of the cool things that has come about, Jerry Moe used to be the director of the children's program at Hazel and Betty Ford in California. And he created the children's program with Betty Ford. It was one of her passions. And they worked recently with Sesame Street to create a character whose mom is a recovering alcoholic. And they're sitting there on the set of Sesame Street, Elmo and this wonderful character, and they're talking about her mom going to meetings. And I think about children sitting in their room after school, in there watching TV, and they hear the story and realize, my mom goes to meetings. I'm not alone. Because the number one thing in this, when we're in it, is we think we're alone. We're the only one. We're scared to tell people for fear of judgment of the person we love. We're scared to have people not want to be around us if they think this is going on in our home. And so educating. The other thing about education is empowerment. Finding the language, finding the words to express what we feel, understand what we're experiencing, to understand how to start separating the person from the disease. If people haven't had the opportunity to get an education, are you willing to look into the resources that are out there? Are you willing to come to She Recovers gatherings? Are you willing to seek a coach? Are you willing to go to a meeting? Are you willing to go through a family program and understand the impact of this disease on the whole family? So resources are out there. It's just not something everybody's aware of. And I would like people to know more what they are. And if they go to my website, embracefamilyrecovery.com, there are resources. Do you hear my kitty? He's freaking out. There are resources on there for literature, books, programs, groups. And so please avail yourself of that information if it can be helpful. Podcasts. Oh my gosh, that's another great resource, right? How many resources are out there in podcasts for partners or families, as well as people with this disease? And they're easy to listen to, and nobody has to know what you're listening to, but you might hear your own story and get some insight.
Awesome. Thank you for those resources. And obviously at She Recovers, you don't necessarily have to identify as having a disease or even using certain labels that were mentioned here today. So you could just be someone who's curious about recovery, and you're welcome at our gatherings, no matter what your situation or background. So thank you so much, Margaret, for coming today and speaking to all of us. We really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you for your experience and your heart. And thank you for those who make this series possible. And most importantly, thank you to all of our viewers for showing up and holding space and bringing forward all your questions. We truly are stronger together. Next Monday, we'll have Etel Liet, who will be giving us a presentation called Unaddicted to You, Loving Through the Darkness. To learn more about Mental Health Monday and all of our upcoming sessions, please visit sherecovers.org/Mental Health Mondays. And for more information about She Recovers Foundation and all of our recovery-focused programs, resources, and touch points, please visit sherecovers.org.